A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Well, we have a bone to pick with Hollywood today, or at least with the writer's room over at Apple TV. Today's prompt from Daniel is actually coming via his wife Hannah, and it is a classic case of technical frustration ruining a good show. Hannah apparently had to tap out of the series Tehran because of one specific scene involving a lone operative, a laptop, and an Airgap nuclear facility.
I can't say I blame her. Once you understand the physical reality of how these systems are architected, watching a Hollywood hack feels like watching a superhero movie, where the hero just decides gravity doesn't apply to them today. It breaks the immersion. By the way, for those curious about the nuts and bolts of how we're putting this together, today's episode is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash.
It's a great prompt because it touches on that friction between cinematic tension and operational reality. The show Tehran depicts this Mossad operative, Tamar Rabinian, who is essentially a one-woman wrecking crew, infiltrating the Iranian capital to sabotage their nuclear program via cyber espionage. Hannah's main gripe was the Airgap penetration, the idea that you can just walk into a high-security facility and, in real time, bridge a network that is physically disconnected from the outside world.
It is the ultimate easy button for screenwriters. They need a ticking clock, they need a face for the hero, and they need a high-stakes outcome. Real cyber warfare is, frankly, quite boring to film. It's months of sitting in windowless rooms looking at code, followed by weeks of waiting for a centrifugal pump to slightly vibrate out of alignment. That doesn't make for a thrilling season finale.
Right. You can't exactly have a dramatic slow-motion shot of a buffer overflow. But Hannah's question is deeper than just, is the show realistic? She's asking where the line is. Does Mossad actually have the kind of reach the show suggests? Is Iran really crawling with human intelligence assets? Or human tea, ready to flip at a moment's notice? We're going to do a bit of a forensic takedown here, comparing the cinematic fantasy of Tehran to the documented reality of what's been happening on the ground, especially given the context of the recent 12-day war and the geopolitical shifts we've seen through early 26.
Let's start with the big one, the air gap. For the uninitiated, an air gap isn't a software setting. It is a physical security measure where a computer or network is physically isolated from unsecured networks, such as the public internet or an unsecure local area network. In a nuclear facility like Natanz or Fordal, the systems controlling the centrifuges, the SCADA systems, or supervisory control and data acquisition are not connected to the guest Wi-Fi. They aren't connected to the office Ethernet. There is literally no wire and no wireless signal connecting those controllers to the outside world.
So, in the show, when Tamar just hacks into it with her laptop while hiding in a closet, what is she actually connecting to? Magic?
Precisely the problem. To bridge an air gap in real life, you need a physical vector. This is why Stuxnet is the gold standard for this discussion. Stuxnet didn't just happen because a hacker was really good at typing fast. It was a multi-year, multi-nation effort that required 4 separate zero-day vulnerabilities. And the bridge was a physical USB drive. Someone had to physically carry that drive into the facility and plug it into a machine that was part of the internal network.
And even then, it wasn't a real-time remote control situation. It was a fire-and-forget payload. Once the worm was in, it operated autonomously. It didn't call back to Tel Aviv for instructions every 5 minutes.
And the logistics of getting that USB drive in are where the real spy work happens. It's not about the code at that point. It's about the supply chain. You don't necessarily need a spy to walk in and plug it in. You might compromise the laptop of a contractor who services the Siemens controllers. You might intercept a shipment of replacement parts and pre-install the malware. That is the reality of breaking an air gap. It's a slow, methodical, boring process of supply chain interdiction.
So the idea of a lone operative doing this on the fly is basically the technical equivalent of a character in a western shooting a 6-shooter 50 times without reloading. It's a trope. But let's look at the physical security. These aren't just office buildings. We're talking about facilities with armed guards, biometric scanners, Faraday cages that block all radio signals, and data diodes, which are physical hardware devices that only allow data to flow in one direction. You can't just send a command back and forth.
The Faraday cage aspect is a huge one that movies always ignore. Even if you had a magical wireless transmitter, the building itself is often designed to be a giant metal box that prevents any electromagnetic signals from entering or leaving. If you're inside a hardened interior room at Natanz, your cell phone isn't getting a signal, let alone a high-speed link to a Mossad command center.
It's funny you mention Natanz, because that's where the real-world comparisons get really interesting. If we look at the actual documented sabotage at Natanz, the July 2020 explosion, for instance, that wasn't a hack in the way Hollywood depicts it. It was physical. The report suggests that explosives were built into a heavy table or piece of equipment that was delivered to the facility months before it was detonated.
That is the real Mossad tradecraft. It's about the long game. It's about knowing that Iran is going to order a specific type of power inverter or a specific piece of laboratory furniture, and then finding a way to be the one who supplies it, or at least the one who handles it during transit. That requires a level of patience and institutional knowledge that a single TV season can't really capture.
I think what bothered Anna, and what bothers me too, is that by making it look easy, like it's just about being a wizard with a keyboard, it actually diminishes how impressive the real operations are. The real operations involve hundreds of people, millions of dollars, and years of deep cover work. It's not one girl in a hoodie.
It also ignores the failed operations. We only hear about the ones that work or the ones that are so big they can't be hidden. We don't see the 5 years of work that went into a plan that was scrapped because a guard changed his shift pattern or a specific shipment was rerouted.
Let's talk about the human side of this, because that was the second part of Hannah's question. In Tehran, it feels like every third person in the city is secretly working for Israel. You've got taxi drivers, high-ranking officials, and students all ready to risk their lives. How realistic is that? Density of assets.
This is where the show gets into very dangerous territory in terms of realism. Iran is not a permissive environment. It is one of the most aggressive counterintelligence environments on Earth. The Ministry of Intelligence and the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, are incredibly paranoid, and for good reason. They know they are being targeted.
Right. And they aren't exactly known for their due process. In 2020, Iran executed 17 people they claimed were spying for the CIA. Whether they all were or not is a different question, but it shows the level of burn that happens. If you are a spy in Tehran, you aren't grabbing coffee with your handler in a public square.
The show makes it look like a gig economy of treason, which is actually a phrase we've used before to describe how some of these low-level recruitments happen via Telegram or WhatsApp. And while that does happen, Israel has been known to recruit people for small tasks like taking photos of a building or tracking a car. Those people are almost always considered expendable and are often caught very quickly.
The high-level stuff, the actual ghost army, running wild behind enemy lines as some headlines put it, is much more clinical. Look at the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in November 2020. That is perhaps the most cinematic real-world operation we've seen. But it was the opposite of what you see in the show.
That was the remote-controlled machine gun operation, right?
They didn't send a team of elite commandos to have a shootout in the street. They used a 1-ton automated weapons system that was smuggled into the country piece by piece, assembled, and mounted on a pickup truck. It used AI and facial recognition to target Fakhrizadeh specifically while he was in a moving car, and then the truck self-destructed.
See, that is actually more sci-fi than anything in the show Tehran, but it's grounded in a very different kind of reality. It's about removing the human element from the point of contact because the risk of capture is too high. If Mossad had a lone operative as talented as Tamar in the show, the last thing they would do is send her into a high security facility where she could be captured and paraded on TV. She's too valuable.
It's the James Bond problem. If you have a secret agent who everyone knows by name, they aren't a very good secret agent. Real intelligence work in a place like Iran is about anonymity. It's about the person who has worked in the same office for 20 years, who never complains, who has a perfect record, and who maybe once every 5 years provides a single piece of critical information.
And we should mention the shift we've seen recently. Since the 12-day war and the ceasefire in 25, the nature of these operations has changed. We saw massive internal sabotage during that conflict. Things like the air defense systems going dark at critical moments. That wasn't just a hack. That was the result of years of embedding sleepers in the Iranian military hierarchy.
Which brings us back to the density question. Does Israel have assets everywhere? Maybe not everywhere, in a way that allows for a weekly TV show plot, but they clearly have a deep reach into the technical and military elite. That's the scary part for the Iranian regime. It's not the student protester, it's the general or the head of the drone program who might be looking for an exit strategy, or who has been compromised by a honeypot operation.
But the show portrays it as very tactical. You need a car? A guy shows up with a car. You need a safe house? There's one around the corner. In reality, every single one of those assets is a massive liability. Every person you talk to is a potential leak. True operational security, or OPSEC, means minimizing the number of people who know anything. The idea of a network of spies all working together in a city like Tehran is an OPSC nightmare.
It really is. If one person gets caught and an enhanced interrogation starts, the whole network collapses. Real operations are usually siloed. One guy might provide the car and have no idea who he's providing it for or why. Another person provides the house. They never meet. They never know each other's names.
I think that's why Hannah felt the show was unrealistic. It's not just the technical hacking of the Airgap, it's the social engineering and the operational flow. It feels too easy. Even when things go wrong in the show, they go wrong in a way that allows for a chase scene. In real life, when things go wrong in Tehran for a Mossad asset, it usually ends with a televised confession and a crane in a public square.
Which is a grim reality that a thriller series on a major streaming platform probably doesn't want to dwell on too much. They want spycraft light. But I think we should give credit where it's due. The show does get the C vibe of the tension right. The feeling of being watched, the paranoia of the Iranian state, the way that technology is used for surveillance. That part is very real.
Oh, absolutely. Iran's smart city initiatives and their use of facial recognition to track protesters and potential dissidents is world-class, unfortunately. If you are an operative in Tehran in 2026, you are dealing with a mesh of Chinese-made surveillance cameras and AI-driven behavioral analysis. You can't just put on a wig and a pair of glasses and disappear.
The physical layer of spying has become a digital layer of surveillance. We talked about this in that episode about real-time spying. The human element is still there, but it's being squeezed by the tech. If you're Tamer Rabinian, your biggest enemy isn't a guy with a gun. It's the algorithm that noticed your gait, doesn't match the ID of the person you're pretending to be.
And that's something the show could have explored if they wanted real modern tension. Instead of, I'm hacking the nuclear reactor, it could be, I'm trying to walk across the street without triggering a facial recognition alert that will lock down the entire block in 60 seconds. That's the real cyber war happening in cities today.
So, to Hannah's point, is it plausible? The Airgap hack? No, not in the way it's shown. Could an Airgap be breached? Yes, but it takes years of supply chain work and specific hardware vulnerabilities. Is the human presence realistic? It's massively exaggerated for drama. Mossad has incredible reach, but they aren't everywhere, in a way that makes it a playground for operatives.
It's a bit like how medical shows are for doctors or legal shows are for lawyers. If you know the reality, the shortcuts the writers take are glaring. But for the average viewer, hacking the Airgap just means she's doing something very difficult and technical. They use it as a metaphor for competence rather than a literal description of an action.
I'm a bit of a stickler like Hannah, though. I think if you're going to make a show about a specific, high-stakes world like intelligence, You owe it to the audience to get the rules of that world right. When you break the rules of your own universe, like the physical isolation of an air-gap network, you lose the tension because the audience realizes the writers can just magic their way out of any situation.
It's the deus ex machina of the digital age. Don't worry, I have a laptop. But let's look at what we do and know about recent Mossad operations. The drone program Sabotage from earlier this year, for instance. Source 2 mentions Mossad established drone bases inside Iran long before the attacks. Now, that's fascinating. That's not a hack, that's logistics. That's smuggling parts, finding a remote location, and having the sheer audacity to launch a strike from within the enemy's own backyard.
That is way more interesting than a hacking scene. Imagine the tradecraft involved in maintaining a secret drone base inside a country as locked down as Iran. How do you get the fuel? How do you get the components? How do you manage the signal for the remote control without the Iranian electronic warfare units picking it up?
That's where the real weird prompts are. It's the intersection of old-school physical smuggling and high-tech remote warfare. It's the Arash story, the Iranian national who revealed his role in destroying a ballistic missile launcher in Tehran. He was an insider, but he wasn't a hacker. He was a guy with access and a motive.
And that's the reality of human. It's rarely about ideology, and more often about mice. Money, ideology, compromise, or ego. In a country under heavy sanctions, money is a huge motivator. In a country with a repressive regime, ideology and ego play a role too. But it's a slow burn of recruitment, not a sudden I'm in moment in a coffee shop.
We also have to consider the Iranian side of the story, the capture of nearly 100 alleged Mossad agents that made headlines recently. Even if only 10% of those were actually Mossad, it shows that the Iranian counterintelligence is active and effective. They are constantly sweeping for these ghosts.
It's a cat and mouse game where the mouse has a laptop and the cat has a noose. It's high stakes, but the moves are much more subtle than a TV show can easily portray. I think Hannah was right to be skeptical. The lone operative is a myth because modern intelligence is an industrial-scale enterprise.
It's the difference between an artisan woodworker and a factory. A lone operative is an artisan. Modern Mossad or the CIA or the GRU are factories. They produce outcomes through massive, coordinated systems.
So, what are the practical takeaways here for people watching these shows or reading the headlines? First, if you hear the word airgap and real-time hack in the same sentence, your BS meter should be hitting the red zone. It's a fundamental physical contradiction.
Second, realize that cyber operations are almost always physical operations at their core. Whether it's a USB drive, a compromised router in the supply chain, or a physical explosive in a server rack, the digital world only exists because of physical hardware. To control the digital, you usually have to touch the physical.
And third, don't underestimate the difficulty of human in a hostile environment. Every asset you see on screen represents a life on the line and a massive investment of time and resources. Spying in Tehran isn't a thrill ride. It's an exercise in extreme patience and risk management.
I think we should also mention that the theatricality of some of these real operations, like the Fakhrizadeh gun or the Natanz table bomb, is intentional. It's directed by the intelligence agencies to send a message. It's psychological warfare, or PSYOPs. They want the Iranian leadership to feel like they are being watched by ghosts.
Which is exactly why a show like Tehran exists. It feeds into that mythos. In a way, the show itself is part of the broader information war. It portrays Mossad as this invincible, omnipresent force, which is exactly the image Israel wants to project to its adversaries. We can get to you anywhere, even through your air-gapped networks.
That is a brilliant point. The show is a force multiplier for the reputation of the agency. Even if the tech is fake, the message of the tech is real. You are not safe.
So, Hannah, you were right to stop watching if you wanted technical accuracy. But if you want to understand the propaganda value of the show, it's actually quite fascinating. It's a modern reimagining of the myth of the mighty Mossad.
Just don't try to use it as a textbook for your next network security audit. Step 1, hire a lone operative with a dramatic backstory.
Step 2, plug into the air gap using your sheer force of will. It doesn't quite work that way. But this is why we love these prompts. They let us peel back the layers of what we see in the media and look at the actual gears turning underneath.
It's a good reminder to always ask, what is the physical layer here? Whether it's a political rumor, a new piece of tech, or a spy thriller, everything eventually has to touch the real world.
And in the real world, physics still wins, even against Mossad. Well, mostly. Those guys are pretty good.
They are, but even they can't type through a Faraday cage.
Not yet, anyway. Give it a few years, and Herman will be telling us about quantum tunneling through leaded glass or something.
Don't give them any ideas. The writers of Season 4 are probably listening and taking notes right now.
Note to self, Herman says quantum tunneling is the next big thing. Well, we've probably thoroughly debunked the cinematic magic of Tehran by now. It's a fun show, but it's definitely spy-fi rather than a documentary.
A high-quality spy-fi. But yeah, for the real deal, you have to look at the slow, grinding work of intelligence. The stuff that doesn't make it into the highlight reel.
Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flemingtop, for keeping the gears turning on this end. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and our research pipeline.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you're enjoying our deep dives into the weird world of tech and intelligence, a quick review on your podcast app really does help us reach more people who like this kind of forensic breakdown.
We'll be back next time with whatever Daniel or Hannah throws our way. Until then, stay skeptical and keep an eye on your supply chain.
And your Faraday cages. See ya.
Bye. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth